Hello, my name is Benjamin Berger, and this week I'm featuring a really interesting new fossil from China. There's a recent paper published in Nature this week describing an unusual fossil from the late Triassic Gaoling group of China, a layer of fossil-rich, shallow marine shales that are well known for exceptional fossilization and preservation of marine reptiles, including ichthyosaurs, thylakosaurs, and placodonts, some of which kind of closely resemble turtles. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. This late Triassic fauna of marine reptiles gives us a really unique window into the evolution of marine reptiles during the first third of the Mesozoic, around the same time that the dinosaurs were originating on land. Now, the origin of turtles has been a contentious issue. Paleontologists have proposed three ideas for turtle origins. The first idea is that turtles originated from a very early primitive reptile that exhibited no holes in the skull beyond the orbit or eye socket. This hypothesis contends that turtles are the sole survivors or members of this early group of reptiles. They're called the anapsids, meaning no holes. The second idea is that turtles originated from an early reptile that exhibited one hole in the skull behind the orbit or eye socket. This hypothesis contains that turtles are actually more closely related to mammals than to reptiles, as mammals arose from this group of reptiles that had only one hole behind the eye socket. This is termed the synapsid hypothesis. The third hypothesis, or the third idea, is that turtles originated from an early reptile that had two holes in the skull behind the eye socket, and that turtles are within the same group as lizards and snakes. They have both of those groups have two holes. Hence, turtles are then considered more closely related to lizards, and this is termed the diapsid hypothesis, which basically means the two-holed hypothesis. Now, historically, paleontologists like Alfred Romer advocated that turtles originated from this group of no-holed primitive reptiles that didn't have any holes beyond the eye socket sometime in the early Triassic. The oldest turtle known at that time was Prognathoscelus from the Norian late Triassic of Germany, dated to around 210 million years ago. Now, the fossil had a complete shell. It lacked any holes in the skull like modern turtles, and it was argued that turtles arose from a group of very primitive reptiles that also did not have any holes beyond the eye socket in the back of the skull sometime in the early Triassic, and basically that's kind of what I was taught in school. Now, the idea of turtles originating from a holeless or anapsid ancestor gained further support when in 2008 a new fossil was found from the late Triassic of China called Odontochelys, which was 10 million years older, dated to around 220 million years ago. Now, Odontochelys had only a plastron, that's the bottom part of the shell, and it didn't have a ossified top part of the shell, or the carapace, which was formed by the expansion of the ribs, the belly ribs and the rib cage on the back. Now, the preserved skull lacked any holes, so there's no holes in the skull like modern turtles, and paleontologists had no reason to think that turtles were anything else than an anapsid reptile. This really started changing in 2015. An even older fossil was found in Germany called Papachelys from the Middle Triassic about 240 million years ago, or about 30 million years older than Prognathoscelus, the first turtle with well-developed shell. Now, a number of specimens were found, and they reconstructed the skull, showing that the animal had teeth and it had 2 holes in the skull. But it also had broadly expanded ribs, kind of indicating a relationship with turtles. Now, this fossil supported an origin from the diapsid, or 2-hole group of reptiles. And it was suggested that sometime between 240 and 220 million years ago, the 2 holes in the skull were lost in this lineage of primitive turtles. Now, interestingly, researchers noticed a relationship between the turtle-like Placodon marine reptiles, which had a single upper hole but lacked the lower hole. This derived condition is called a yunguiensis condition, where the lower hole is lost. It was now thought that Placodons, which resembled turtles, were related to them because they showed an intermediate transition between the 2 holes found in the diapsid condition of these earliest turtles, Papachelius, and the 0 hole condition found in Odontocheles and Proganachellus. The new fossil from China is dated to around 230 million years ago, right between this transition. Now, the skull is damaged, and the authors of the paper interpret the skull as having lost the supratemporal fenestra, or the upper hole, and retaining only the lower hole, which is really weird, since previously it was thought that the lower hole was the first to be lost, since Placodons only have the upper hole, the yunguiensis condition. So this was something very different. Now, I begin wondering if this new fossil was not an early turtle, but a different creature altogether. Now, during the Permian, about 270 million years ago, there was an ancient group of large synapsid reptiles, meaning that they only had 1 hole, and it was actually the more lower down on the skull. Now, among this group of synapsids, or the 1 holes, were the Caesidae, a group of big-bellied reptiles that have kind of like large tanks. Some of them got to be about 2 meters long. Some of them actually were also aquatic, moving into the oceans and paddling using broad hands and feet in the water. Now, given the feature of this new fossil, this new marine fossil, which is considerably larger than any previously described stem turtle, and exhibiting a body plan that's very similar and very reminiscent of this ancient Permian family, I begin wondering if this fossil could be possibly a caesid. Now, there's one thing in the morphology of this animal that indicates that it may be more closely related to turtles, and that is these broadly shaped, thickened ribs that it exhibits, which are not found in the Caesidae family. And some of the features of the pelvis also seem to indicate a relationship with turtles. Now, the Caesidae, of course, went extinct during the late Permian, and if this fossil was a member of that ancient group, it would indicate a 40 million year extension of the group into the Mesozoic and surviving through the Permian-Triassic mass extinction event. Now, furthermore, phylogenetic analysis does not show any support for this fossil to have been related to caesid synapsid reptiles, but found them to be grouped within stem turtles like Odontocheles and Papachelius, despite differences in the skull and this much larger body size that this fossil exhibited. However, no Placodons, interestingly enough, were included in their analysis. Now, researchers have noted that this is the first stem turtle to actually exhibit a beak, much like what you find in modern turtles. In any case, this new fossil, called Eorhynchocheles, will add to the complexity on the issue of the origin of turtles and is a really weird fossil. Thanks for watching. I hope to add new videos each week to my YouTube channel about geology and paleontology, so be sure to subscribe so you get a notification of my newest videos, and I will see you next week.